There are moments in baseball that don't need an explanation. They just need silence. What happened in the ninth inning wasn't a bad call. It wasn't a controversial slide. It wasn't even a dirty play that someone could point to and say, "There, that's where it went wrong." What happened in the ninth inning was something quieter. Something more unsettling. The kind of moment that doesn't show up clearly on the box score but burns itself into the memory of everyone who watched. And when the legends spoke, they didn't hold back. It was supposed to be a rest day. That word carries weight in baseball. A rest day for Shohei Ohtani is not simply a day off. It is a carefully constructed decision. A medical calculation. A strategic choice made by an organization that understands, better than anyone, that what they have in Ohtani is not replaceable. Not today. Not in 5 years. Not ever. So when his name appeared on the lineup card, in the middle of what was supposed to be his rest, people noticed. The stadium noticed. The broadcast booth noticed. And more importantly, the rest of baseball noticed. He didn't complain. He never does. He walked to the plate the way he always does. With that quiet calm that looks like confidence but feels like something deeper. Something that belongs less to sport and more to a man who has made peace with the weight he carries every single day he puts on that uniform. The at-bat went deep into the count. The pitcher was working carefully, as they always do against Ohtani. Every pitch was placed with intention. Every sequence was built to avoid the one mistake that could end an inning, change a game, define a night. And then came the ninth. The details of what happened in that inning are important. Not because they are dramatic on their own, but because of what they revealed. Ohtani was in the on-deck circle. The Dodgers were down by 1. The game was still alive. The entire stadium, and the millions watching at home, understood what that moment meant. If it came to Ohtani, anything was possible. That is not a statement built on mythology. That is a statement built on evidence. On exit velocities and launch angles and a career that has redefined what a baseball player is allowed to be. But it didn't come to him. The inning ended before his name was called. One pitch. One swing. One out that nobody expected to be the final out. And just like that, the game was over. The scoreboard went final. The Dodgers lost. And Ohtani stood in the on-deck circle for a moment longer than he needed to. He didn't throw his helmet. He didn't argue. He didn't say a word to anyone around him. He simply stood there. Bat in hand. Eyes on the field. Processing something that the rest of the world was still trying to understand. That image, Ohtani standing alone in the on-deck circle while the stadium began to empty, is the image that broke the internet overnight. It started slowly, the way these things always do. A clip. A screenshot. A single post on social media that said nothing more than, "Did you see that?" And then it spread. Not because people were outraged in the simple sense of the word. But because people who understood baseball, people who had played it, managed it, broadcast it for decades, felt something watching that clip that they couldn't immediately name. By midnight, the legends had started talking. Not all of them. But enough. The voices that carry weight in this sport. The names that appeared in World Series games and Hall of Fame speeches. The men who understand, from personal experience, what it feels like to stand in that on-deck circle and know that the game is ending without you. Their words were not uniform. Some were measured. Some were sharp. Some were the kind of sentences that people screenshot and share without adding anything, because nothing needs to be added. But beneath all of it was a single, unified sentiment. This was wrong. Not wrong in a rule sense. Nobody was breaking a rule. The lineup was constructed within the boundaries of what the game allows. The decisions made by the opposing dugout were legal and logical and defensible on a spreadsheet. But baseball has never been only a spreadsheet. One former MVP, speaking on a national broadcast the following morning, put it plainly. His voice was calm. He wasn't angry. He was reporting it, the way a doctor reports a diagnosis. He said, "There are nights when you protect the game from itself." This was one of those nights. And nobody did. The room where he said that went very quiet. Because everyone understood what he meant. Ohtani on a rest day, placed into a lineup in a close game, carried through 8 innings of tension, and then left standing, watching, while the final out was recorded. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't malice. But it had the shape of something that should not have happened. And the legends felt it in their bones. By morning, the support was coming from everywhere. Not just from former players. Not just from analysts and broadcasters. From fans across the country who had set their alarms, who had stayed up past midnight on a weeknight, who had organized their entire evening around the possibility of watching Ohtani walk to the plate in the 9th inning with the game on the line. The messages poured in from every corner of the country. From baseball cities and non-baseball cities. From people who had watched the sport their entire lives and people who had discovered it 3 years ago because of the man who pitches and hits and somehow makes both feel inevitable. They didn't write long posts. Most of them didn't need to. A few words. A few sentences. The kind of support that doesn't require an explanation because the feeling behind it is universal. He deserved that at-bat. 3 words. Repeated thousands of times across thousands of accounts. In different fonts and different languages and different tones. But always the same 3 words. He deserved that at-bat. The press conference happened late. By the time the manager sat down in front of the microphone, the conversation had already been happening for hours. The legends had already spoken. The fans had already weighed in. Social media had already rendered its verdict. And yet the manager sat down with the look of a man who had made a decision he believed in and was prepared to defend it. The first question came quickly. Was Ohtani supposed to bat in the 9th? The manager didn't flinch. He nodded slightly, as if he had expected the question to be even sharper than it was. The game ended before we got to him. That's baseball. 3 words. The same number as the fans had used. But pointing in the opposite direction. The reporter pressed further. Asked about the decision to play Ohtani at all on a scheduled rest day. Asked whether the organization had discussed the risk. Asked whether, in hindsight, the entire evening had placed Ohtani in a position that nobody had fully thought through. The manager paused for a long moment. He didn't look angry. He didn't look defensive. He looked like a man doing arithmetic in his head. Weighing something that didn't have a clean answer. Shohei wanted to play. We made the decision together. And I'll stand by that. What the manager didn't say, what nobody said out loud in that press conference room, was the part that the legends had already said for them. That Ohtani wanting to play is not the same thing as Ohtani needing to play. That the decision to place him in a lineup on a rest day, in a game with playoff implications, in a situation where the final inning could go either way, was a decision that carried a cost. A cost that didn't show up in the box score. A cost that wouldn't show up until later in the season, or maybe not until October, when the games become something different entirely. One Hall of Famer addressed this directly. Not in a broadcast. In a short statement released through his social media account. 3 paragraphs. Written simply. No drama, no performance. The second paragraph read, "The greatest players in this game are not protected by rules. They are protected by judgment. And judgment requires people around them who are willing to say, 'Not tonight.' Even when the player himself would never say it." That statement was shared more than anything else from that entire night. More than the clip of Ohtani in the on-deck circle. More than the box score. More than the final highlight. Because it named the thing that everyone had been feeling but nobody had been able to say cleanly. Ohtani didn't speak publicly after the game. He rarely does in moments like these. That is not evasion. That is not strategy. That is simply who he is. A man who processes things internally. Who lets his performance speak and keeps the rest somewhere private and unreachable. But his teammates spoke. Not on the record. Not in formal press conferences. In the small conversations that happen in hallways and parking lots and training rooms after a difficult night. The word that kept appearing, according to those close to the situation, was frustrated. Not at the outcome. Not at the final score. At the feeling that the moment had passed. That the inning had closed. That the at-bat that the entire stadium had been building toward, that the entire country had stayed awake to see, had simply not arrived. Frustrated in the way that only athletes understand. The specific, particular frustration of preparation meeting circumstance and finding that circumstance had moved on without you. There is a version of this story that ends simply. The Dodgers lost. The 9th inning ended without Ohtani at the plate. Rest day or no rest day, the outcome was the same. One loss. One night. One story that will be forgotten by the time the next series begins. But that is not the version the legends are telling. The version they are telling is longer. And heavier. And built on something that goes beyond one game in one stadium on one night in the middle of a long season. It is a version about what Ohtani represents, not just to the Dodgers, not just to baseball, but to the idea of what sport can be when something genuinely unprecedented walks through the door. And the argument the legends are making, carefully, seriously, without sentimentality, is that unprecedented things require unprecedented care. That standing in an on-deck circle while a game ends around you is a small thing. Unless the person standing there is Shohei Ohtani. In which case, nothing about it is small at all. The support from across the country didn't stop by morning. It was still there. Quiet and steady and real. The kind of support that doesn't need a hashtag. The kind that shows up in the comments sections of highlight clips and in the conversations that fans have with each other before the next game begins. The message was the same everywhere. We saw it. We felt it. And we're not ready to let it go.